Good afternoon, and thanks for coming. I'm afraid I have to start off with a little bit of bad news. It seems that Jack and Rose will not be joining us. It turns out that Rose did let go. But in 1976, 49 years ago, my wife and I got married. We bought a house on the west side of Jacksonville in one of the historical areas, the Avondale area. And one of the first things we did was go around and introduce ourselves to all of our new neighbors. But the house behind us had a little bungalow right up against our fence, and there was a gentleman in there that never entered the door. And one day I happened to catch him coming from the grocery store and swooped down on him and introduced myself. He smiled shyly and told us his name was Louis Garrett. And then he shared his secret, a rather deep and dark secret. He was a Titanic survivor. And his sister was one too. And if you fed him, he would tell you the story. And we had him over a couple of times. All right, come on, don't. But before we begin with Louis' story, which is what I'm intending to share with you today, let's play Titanic trivia. And you can win some very valuable prizes. If you know the answers, and if you don't know the answers, that's okay. Try anyway. What's fun if everybody knowing everything? The first one, I'm not going to bother you with this, but how much did it cost to travel on the Titanic in 1912? Well, third class, which was steerage, cost you between $15 and $40. Now, it sounds like not very much, but you've got to remember you could buy a nice house for $400, and a brand new car was less than $1,000. So, to those people, it was a lot of money. Second class started at about $60, and first class started at $150. The cost varied depending upon various options such as if or not it had a window, the size of the room, and also the convenience to the stairways, since there were no elevators. But there were two first-class suites that cost $4,350. They were the size of a small ranch house with 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, 2 wardrobes, and a private bath. And in the movie, obviously Cal had the money to buy one of those because that's where Rose and her entourage were staying. Come on, baby. Here we go. Oops. And thank you so much. No. Okay, how much would it cost to travel on the Titanic today with 2024 inflation rates? Third class tickets started at $1,071. Second class tickets $1,834. First class tickets $45.91. But those first class suites would cost you $133,000. Talk about luxurious. Okay. Anybody know what was the Titanic's destination?
New York.
New York. Give these people lollipops. You're right. What was the name of the company that owned the Titanic?
White Star.
White Star. Very good. Y'all were paying attention to the movie. How many propellers did Titanic have?
2. No.
I hear 2. I hear 4. 3. So you get half credit. How many anchors did the Titanic have? 1,
2,
2, 4.
3.
Eventually somebody's going to hit 5. There were 3 in the front, in the bow, and 2 at the stern. The largest bow anchor was the one in the middle. Weighed 15.8 tons, one of the largest anchors made at that time. Now, how many horses were required to pull that anchor on the wheel car? They had to drag it to the construction site. Well, 20. And those were not ponies. Those were, of course, your draft horses who were very powerful. Just give you an idea of the weight and the size of that thing. All right, how many decks did Titanic have? I hear 5. 7. 8.
9.
9. Don't give up now, because it was 10. The top deck was the boat deck, which was where the lifeboats were stored. That became a very popular deck, by the way. The promenade deck, A, had enclosed and open promenades for them to walk along and socialize. The B deck was first-class passenger accommodations. The C deck was more first-class accommodations, but included the grand stairway that you saw in the movie. The D deck was first-class dining. The F deck was second-class accommodations. The F deck was third-class or steerage cabins and the service area. G deck was the lowest passenger deck, had more third-class or steerage cabins there. The orlop deck had cargo and storage areas, and then the tank top, as they called it, had the boilers and the other machineries that made the ship move. All right, how many compartments did the boat have? Come on, you're doing a great job of guessing so far.
7.
7. Anybody else?
6.
6. 8.
9.
9. 9. Y'all give up too easily. How many compartments could have been flooded and the boat still sink, or still float rather? 4. Anybody else? Bingo, we got a winner back there. It was 4. And how many of the compartments were damaged? 5. So close. How many iceberg warnings did the Titanic receive? None?
Caution.
No. They got actual iceberg warnings of icebergs in the water. And there were 7 of them. And they were all ignored because the owner wanted to set a new transatlantic speed record on the maiden voyage. Poor decision. I had some managers like that when I was working too. How far from New York was the Titanic when it hit the iceberg?
Too far.
Good point. It wasn't that far. It was only 400 miles. At their rate of speed, about 20 hours, I think, before they would have arrived. Okay, they didn't send out an SOS. They sent out a CQD code. Does anybody know what that stood for? It's kind of funky. It was come quick, danger. Okay. They were English, what can I say? Now, how many lifeboats did the Titanic have?
Not enough.
Yep, you just heard on the movie. That's right. There were 20. There were 16 standard wooden lifeboats, 2 wooden cutters, 4 collapsible canvas lifeboats with a capacity of 1,178 people. But there were 2,244 passengers and crew. The capacity was over 1,000 too few. And the number of lifeboats was limited because of the aesthetics. They thought it would look tacky to have more lifeboats. And after all, the ship could not sink, right? Oh, what fools we humans can be. How many lifeboats were actually launched?
All of them?
Nope. 18 of them, holding 705 survivors. The first lifeboat was launched with only 24 people aboard it. 2 collapsible lifeboats were washed away, and 6 people aboard those lifeboats died from the exposure to the elements. How many people could each lifeboat hold? 65. What a terrible waste of space. Yep, they had the capacity for 1,300 people, an additional 695 survivors. How many dogs survived the Titanic? 3. We can only assume they were tiny dogs, because let's hope so anyway. Now, how tall were the Titanic's funnels, smoke funnels? There's a place in the story about that. That's why I included this here. approximately 62 feet tall, with 24 feet at their widest diameter. How many musicians were in the band?
20.
20? Big band. I hear 20. I'm 20. Huh?
5.
5.
12.
12. 8. They were employed by the Liverpool firm of C.W. and F.N. Black to provide musical entertainment for the first-class passengers. They consisted of a string trio and a 5-piece band. They played for 2 hours after the Titanic struck. They played mainly upbeat ragtime and waltz music, and none of them survived. Wallace Hartley's violin was recovered from the wreckage and sold at auction in 2013 for over £1 million. How many children were aboard the Titanic? There were 130. 109 between 14 and younger, and then 21 ages 15 to 17. And how many of them perished? 53, mostly in third class with steerage people. Are there any Titanic survivors still alive?
Yes.
I hear a yes
No.
and some no's. Well, it is no. The last survivor, Milvania Dean, passed away May 31st, 2009 at the age of 97. She was 2 months old when the Titanic sank. Her recollection of it was not much, apparently. This is, I found kind of interesting. How many passengers canceled their plans to sail on the Titanic because of dreams about it sinking? Halloween's coming up. It's kind of spooky, isn't it? 20 people changed their plans and saved their lives. Okay, let's talk a little bit about life in steerage on a non-Titanic ship. Steerage was the economy passage. These were located in areas near the engine rooms and cargo storage. On some ships, steerage was very cramped, dirty, and airless. There might be a communal sleeping area. On many ships, the passengers provided their own food and bedding, and attacks on women and the helpless were often. But on the Titanic, steerage on the Titanic was rather pleasant. It was often compared to second-class passage accommodations on other ships. There were small cabins with 2 bunk beds that accommodated 4 sleepers. The beds had a mattress, pillow, and a blanket, but no sheets or pillowcases. But most of the people in steerage were moving to America, so they had their possessions with them, and so they generally had their own sheets and their own pillowcases and whatever else they might be lacking. Meals were provided that were described as tasty and wholesome. However, there were no private tables. Everyone sat at long wooden tables and benches. There were recreational opportunities, board games, cards, and an area for dancing and socializing. There were facilities for washing, but only 2 bathtubs. Maybe they held them over the side and dunked them, I don't know. And of course, they were a long way from the lifeboats. Now, those will show you what those accommodations were like. You can see the bunk beds, little washing basin there. Also, none of these had private toilets, I might add as well. Now, this is what the third-class dining room of the Titanic's sister ship, the Olympic, looked like. You can see the tables and the chairs. And this was an actual Titanic menu for one of the days. If you can't read it, this was for actually April the 14th. Breakfast was oatmeal, porridge, and milk, smoked herrings, jacket potatoes, eggs and ham, fresh bread and butter, marmalade, Swedish bread, tea, and coffee. Dinner was rice soup, fresh bread, cabin biscuits, roast beef, brown gravy, sweet corn, boiled potatoes, plum pudding, sweet sauce, fruit, tea, cold meat, cheese, pickles, fresh bread, butter, and stewed eggs, and rice and tea for supper as well. And I like it here. It says, any complaints respecting the food supplied, want of attention or incivility should be at once reported to the purser or chief steward. For purposes of identification, each steward wears a numbered badge on their arm. So apparently they took their service rather seriously, and life in the steerage area didn't sound too bad. Okay, let's talk about our neighbor, Louis Garrett. He was born Ilias Nicola Jared, I believe is how it's pronounced. His sister was Amelia, who became Amelia. They were born in a small village in Lebanon. His family was the village miller. They were Christian Syrians, and they were fleeing from the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. The year before, his mother and older siblings had already traveled to Jacksonville and were living with family. They stayed behind, he and his sister stayed behind with their father, who, like I said, is the village miller, to sell their house, the business, and properties. They netted $500. They then traveled to Cherbourg, France, to board the Titanic. But you had to pass a physical examination. And the father had an eye infection, and they didn't let him on board. So he sent his two small children, who spoke no English, to travel by themselves and to take that $500 to their family. Now, in his words, life on the ship was pleasant. The other passengers and some of the crew were very kind towards my sister and me. Our biggest concern was making sure we did not lose that $500. We were asleep when the iceberg hit the ship. I didn't feel anything, but my sister did. She woke me and insisted something was wrong. She wanted me to go and investigate, but I refused. Finally, she insisted we both go, so we got dressed. A crewman came into the steerage area and assured everyone that everything was fine. About 20 minutes later, he rushed back and told everyone to leave immediately, but not to take our possessions. Since we were dressed, we followed everybody out and up several flights of stairs. The group was stopped because of a locked or jammed gate. At that time, we realized we had forgotten the money. And they tried to go back to the steerage area to recover it. But when they got there, it was already underwater. And upset, they tried to return to the group. But a crewman saw them and motioned for them to follow him. He led them down some passageways and upstairs and brought them onto one of the decks besides one of the smokestacks. There were metal rungs going up like a ladder, and he motioned for us to start climbing. I went first and my sister followed. The metal was rough and hard to hold. Ice was forming on the rungs too, and it was slippery. The ship began to list, and I was getting tired. I wanted to let go and drop into the water below, but my sister yelled at me to keep climbing. Good thing too, because the impact upon hitting the water would likely have killed us, or the water temperatures surely would have. Can you imagine the fear in these two little kids, lost and confused and not speaking English?
Would you remind us how old they are right now when they're on the
Okay,
ship?
and thank you. That's if you Google them, you'll because they did several interviews and all. You'll notice a couple little minor discrepancies, mainly about their age. I read where Louis was 10 and his sister was 12. I read where he was 11 and she was 13. But I'm going with what he told us, which was 9 and 11. So, thank you. I meant to point that out. We climbed about 50 or 60 feet to the first class level. Now think about it. That is the equivalent of a 6th floor climb up the side of a building. That had to have been really challenging. We made it to the first class level. People pulled us over the railing and we collapsed from the exertion. I was very frightened. There were guns being shot and concrete rockets being fired. People were screaming and shouting and crying everywhere. We had lost our money. Plus, I did not understand what people were saying. The last lifeboat was being filled. It was nearly full when one of the first-class passengers stepped off of the boat. I saw him kiss his young, pregnant wife, and he picked up the first person he could and put them in his spot. It was me. My sister was crying and screaming and trying to get to me, so he picked her up and placed her beside me. We hugged tightly. There were 5 crewmen with us. Oh, by the way, the man's last words to his wife were, "You're in good hands now." There were 5 crewmen with us, and they rowed furiously to pull us away from the sinking ship. We went out about 200 yards. From there, we heard the band play "Nearer My God to Thee" as the last song they played. We witnessed the ship sink beneath the ocean, and we heard the cries of the people who were in the water, either freezing to death or drowning. It was sad and frightening. The crewmen rowed the boat further away to prevent people in the water from trying to enter the lifeboat. And they rowed us so far away, we were one of the last lifeboats rescued by the Carpathia. One person in the lifeboat died. They were wrapped in a sheet and slipped over the side. Everyone huddled together to stay warm. Some people sang and others prayed to keep their courage up. Now, these were the members of the band. When we were finally rescued, the crewmen helped everybody out of the lifeboat and onto the bigger ship. We were given dry towels, hot tea, and buttered bread and dry clothes. The clothes were 3 times too big, but I didn't care. My sister had screamed so hard during the ordeal that she was speechless for nearly 3 months before her voice returned. When the Carpathia unloaded their human cargo in New York, the 2 small children who spoke no English were somehow overlooked, and their names were not initially on the list of survivors. And so their family assumed they had died. But one brother refused to accept that, and he traveled to New York, and he found them in one of the hospitals. And months later, their father finally made it to Jacksonville. And this is what it was like in those lifeboats as they were being taken out of the water. And of course, they assumed the ship could not sink. And this is a photo of some of the Titanic surviving crew some days after the ship sank. Now, this was their place when they finally were included on the list of surviving passengers. In New York, the story of how we were spared because a man sacrificed himself for us began to spread. People were curious as to who the man was. We were brought a book that had photos of the first-class passengers, and we were asked to point out who our hero was. Both of us identified the same man, and we were told his name was Jacob John Astor IV. And that's what Astor looked like. Astor, if you didn't know, was one of the wealthiest men at the time, and his personal wealth was enough to build 30 Titanics. His final words to his wife were, "You're in good hands now." Years later, I was constantly examining how, but mostly why, my sister and I survived. Why 2 poor, illiterate peasant children were spared and so many others died. It could only be divine intervention. So I changed my name, joined the Jehovah's Witnesses, and devoted my life to the Lord. Both he and his sister declared their birthdays to be April the 15th, the date of the sinking. He moved to Atlanta to live with his son and died in 1981. The brother and sister are buried at the Evergreen Cemetery in Jacksonville. Also, the Reverend Robert Bateman is buried there too. Bateman was a minister who served in England and Ireland before moving to Jacksonville, where he worked with the First Baptist Church. He returned to England to escort his sister-in-law home. They initially were booked on another ship, but for reasons I can't find out, changed their mind and joined the Titanic. He managed to get his sister-in-law into a lifeboat. He stayed behind. Supposedly, he directed the band in playing "Nearer My God to Thee." His sister-in-law, Ava, their lifeboat was still so close that she could actually see him directing the band playing that song. He led prayers with many of the people stranded on board. He was the inspiration for the minister in the movie, and he did not survive. His body was recovered 10 days later, and it was identified by his very unusual pocket watch. He was returned to Jacksonville and also buried in the Evergreen Cemetery. Thanks for your attention. It really brings that movie to life, doesn't it?
Wow. Well, I'm a little speechless. Now we need the tissues. Is there any questions to Chip?
Okay.
Yes.
How about 20 people that had the dream or had a vision that the boat was going to sink? Did people take out travel insurance during that time period?
I don't know. I don't know if it was available. It certainly would have paid off more ways than one.
Yeah, I.
Yes, sir.
Just, further background, or at least information, I actually knew a survivor of the Titanic when I lived in Key West. Her name was Bertha, I can't remember her last name, and she was head of the Red Cross in Key West. And she did not like to talk about her experience because she couldn't, A, she didn't want the notoriety, and B, she was an infant when the boat went down, and she had absolutely no idea who she was, where she came from, who her parents were, what class they were at. But she was a very wonderful and giving person, and clearly the experience of being on surviving the Titanic made her very limazinary toward everyone.
You know, one of the strongest images from the movie that still plagues me is when the lifeboat went back to try and find survivors, and they shone it on the woman holding her dead baby in her arms. What a terrible, terrible thing to have to endure.
How long was it before the lifeboats were found, like the ones we were?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
How long before the real lifeboats were found, the people in
Uh,
them?
I believe that they were in the water for up to 16 hours. Freezing cold it was. And remember, most of these people were not dressed for cold weather. They were in their night clothes. And not knowing if anybody was coming.
What
Yes.
kind of conversations did you have with the brother and the sister, one-on-one?
I never met the sister, but we had Louis over for dinner a couple of times. And that's where, and what he said has stuck with us because it was so strong. And I was not even that familiar with the Titanic at that time. I wish I had known more because I would have asked better questions. But when I saw the movie, that movie really brought it home to me. You know, I think it got like 11 Academy Awards. Very, very strong movie. And that's why we try to set the stage a little bit by showing a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
What was his career when you knew him? What did
He was
do?
retired.
But what did he do prior to that, do you know?
Well, that's one of those questions I didn't ask. And he didn't bring up. Louis was very, very shy. I mean, you really had to pull stuff out of him. Except when it came to this. And one of the things we laughed about was whenever he met somebody new, no matter how shy he was, within 2 minutes he could bring up the fact he was a Titanic survivor. That was one thing he was very, I guess, proud of, because it really made him very distinctive. And like I said, if you go on and Google him, you'll find more information, because there's quite a bit of information online about them. And if you Google Astor, it will say he gave his life up for 2 unknown immigrant children. So it all ties together nicely. Yes.
My wife and I did a transatlantic crossing from Southampton to New York, and as we got near where the Titanic sank, the ship's captain came on the speaker and talked about it. That evening for dinner was the menu that they had for the Titanic for that evening. So it was really an interesting moment there.
I bet. Anyone else? Well, again, thank you for your time and your attention.